Hello. And welcome to Deerfield Public Library Twitch channel. I'm Anne.
I'm Christina.
And you don't get an intro today because I hit the wrong button. So welcome back. We will once again be delving into the tale of Genji to learn more about Genji's horrible ideas about women.
Deep sigh.
Deep sigh. So in the previous chapter, Genji kind of did another little kidnapping.
Kind of.
A little bit. He basically, like, if I'm remembering correctly, burned into my brain, he found, so he was having an affair with, emotional affair, because remember, at this point in time in Heian era Japan, emotional affairs are the tops. We love an emotional affair. So he was having an emotional affair with this woman who he found out was his friend's ex. And she had a daughter with said friend, and then she dies. And so he gets like real pushy about adopting the daughter, like to the point where the grandmother is like, this is weird. Like, I know you're really pretty and that gives you a lot of pretty privilege, Genji, but like, I'm starting to think it's a little weird. But spoiler alert, they eventually give in because what better place to send a young girl than a creepy 18-year-old's house?
But he's pretty.
But he's super hot. As we know, he is super hot. So that, prettiness forgives all sins. Honestly, this is pretty privileged, the book, isn't it?
Yeah.
At least so.
I mean, that's his thing, right? Like, That's why he gets everything.
Wait until you meet his son. That won't happen until like 2/3 of the way. The skinny is they think the last third of the book was actually written by Murasaki Shikibu's daughter or someone else as like fan fiction, because the
first fan fiction,
right? Because Genji dies like 2/3 of the way through. Spoiler alert for this 1,000-year-old book. Genji dies like 2/3 of the way through, and there's like something that feels like an ending, and then it picks up with his son as like a young adult, and it basically like all the stuff we see in these early chapters like comes back for Genji's son, and so it's very much reads as fan fiction by someone who knew Murasaki Shikibu. And so get excited for that in approximately 1 to 2 years. We're going.
Chapter 6, The Safflower. Suetsumohana. Safflower is a yellow or orange flower that yields a scarlet dye, and this chapter, in which scarlet is a recurrent motif, features a woman known to readers as Suetsumohana. Her name comes from a poem by Genji. This is not at all a color to which I warm. What then did I mean by letting myself brush sleeves with a safflower in full blush? I don't know. The chapter makes Genji's hidden meaning plain.
Find out. So once again, as we've discussed, in Heian era Japan, emotional affairs, number one. In fact, like, if you're getting all of your emotional and physical needs from the same woman, you're doing it wrong.
Okay. The safflower relationship to earlier chapters.
Just so you guys are on the same page as we are about where this chapter fits in.
The Safflower covers about the same period, the year when Genji is 18, as young Murasaki, but no narrative connection between the two appears until the end of the chapter. It extends into the first month of the following year.
So yeah, I always forget because he acts like an adult, but you forget he's like literally 18.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in.
Alrighty.
Here we go.
No, despite the passing months, he could not forget how someone he still loved had gone like dew from a twilight beauty, and those proud, fastidious ladies who always withheld themselves from him were so demanding that he yearned particularly for the one who had touched his heart by yielding to him utterly.
It was the one the ghost killed. Just as a reminder.
How he longed, incorrigible as ever, to find someone dear and sweet, with no great name to uphold, and with whom he need never feel required to be on his best behavior.
You also forget he was like married off at like 13 to a woman who does not want to talk to him.
He missed no news of any likely prospect, and one may assume that if he detected any further sign of promise, he sent her at least an encouraging line.
this is like the hand era version of Tinder. And he's swiping, what is it, swipe right to say you like someone? I don't know, it's Tinder.
I think it's right.
He's swiping right on everyone. He's just swipe right, swipe.
Yeah. Because I don't care what they look like, don't care what their profile says.
I mean, to be fair, the one like nice thing about Genji, and I'm being generous with the word nice, is he loves like every woman. He's like, oh, is she not as pretty as you think she should be? I'm sure she has other good qualities.
We'll give you that.
He finds the good in every person.
All right.
Does it go badly? Yes.
Every time.
Every time.
Who by now can doubt that very few rebuffed him or received him with indifference? Those who remained willfully cool simply failed in the prim and proper heartlessness of their ways to know their place, nor did they often persist long in their pride, for they would then collapse ignominiously into marriage with one nobody or another. He dropped many for that reason.
I like that. Collapse ignominiously into marriage. I'm going to tell this to my sister, who's engaged.
Is that going to be in your speech?
Oh my God. Can you imagine? She'd be like, she wouldn't even know what I was referencing. She'd just be like, what did you just say?
Now and again, he recalled that woman of the cicada shell with irritations.
The girl who ran from him so successfully that she basically like deuced out of there.
She of the reed, too, must have been surprised sometimes by a note from him whenever a favorable breeze blew her way. He would gladly have seen her again at her ease in the lamplight. On the whole, he was not one to forget any woman he had once known.
It's a serial killer sentence. Genji.
The daughter of Nurse Sayamon, his favorite after Nurse Daini, was now serving at court, where she was known as Taifu, the commissioner's Niobu.
Whenever you see, like, because you know Spanish, right?
Yeah.
All of the vowels sound the same. So, Saemon, and you pronounce all of them.
Okay.
Da-i-ni.
Got it.
That'll help.
Pronounce everything.
Pronounce everything. Be precise. Nurse Daini. Who is Taifu.
The commissioner's
Niobu. And when you see like the line over the O, that's like you imagine like an extra will. It's like an elongated for what's it to Niobu instead of Niobu.
Her father, the commissioner of war, was of imperial descent. Genji himself sometimes called on her for one errand or another, since she was a young person much given to gallantry. When not at the palace, she lived at her father's, now that her mother had gone down to the provinces as the wife of the governor of Chikuzen. Taifu once happened to tell Genji how the last and best-loved daughter born to His Highness of Hitachi was living in sad circumstances now that her father was gone.
Oh, guess it's about to buy.
What a shame, Genji, intrigued, asked to hear more. I know little about her character or looks. She is so shy and reticent that when I visit her of an evening, I speak to her through curtains and so on. Her one real friend seems to be her kin.
It's type of instrument.
Oh, okay.
Good guy.
What? I thought it was like family. Like
yeah, no.
Kin.
But I know why you think that, but yeah, it's an instrument. Her one friend is to piano, basically. It's like it's a stringed instrument. I'm pretty sure it's the one that you lay down in front of you. But I think you get that.
That is one of the three friends, though I can think of another that would ill become her. Please let me hear her. His Highness, her father, played so well that I cannot imagine she is no better than anyone else. I wonder whether her music would really interest you, she answered, although she spoke in a manner designed to pique his interest. You are trying to tempt me, aren't you? I feel like that's really easy to do.
The king is also the koto.
Oh, okay.
Same thing. So it's like a zither. Pretty much it. And thank you.
I shall go there secretly one of these nights when the moon is veiled. You must come with me. Taifu had not wanted to get in this deep, but she still went there one fine spring evening.
Every time. There's all these ladies who don't, well, I mean, it's very like Japanese culture to like not say no. Like, we had a joke in Japanese class that the only reason the Americans got in when the Meiji era started was because they didn't realize, like, so like Matthew Perry shows up, right? And he's like, hey, you're going to open up your borders to like international like commerce.
Yeah.
And the Japanese people would, maybe? And the Americans were like, great. They said maybe. That means yes. And in Japanese culture, it was very much, maybe means no, definitely not. That is the strongest no you could possibly receive. So, maybe. And then she's like, great, let's go. She's like, I don't know how to get out of this.
Her father had taken up residence elsewhere and visited the place only now and again. But Taifu, who had never felt comfortable at her stepmother's, had become a familiar presence there. Genji arrived, as he had said he would, at the prettiest hour of the moon of the 16th night.
He would.
What a pity, Taifu exclaimed. This is not at all the kind of night to bring out an instrument's tone. Do go to her, though, and get her to play a little. I would hate to leave again without hearing her at all. Taifu installed him in her own comfortably casual room and set off, guilty and nervous, for the main house. The lattice shutters were still up, and Her Highness was gazing out at a deliciously fragrant plum tree. Taifu judged the moment to be propitious.
Fortunate.
I could not resist the promise of so beautiful a night, my lady, when I realized how lovely your keen would sound. So I regret that in the rush of all my comings and goings, I am never able to hear you play. I gather that some people really do appreciate the keen, Her Highness answered, but how could my playing possibly interest anyone who frequents His Majesty's suite? She sent for her instrument, and Taifu trembled to think how she might sound to Genji. She played very softly. It was quite nice. Not that she was any sort of master, but her instrument was so superb in tone that Genji was not displeased by what he heard. That so great a lord should have brought up his daughter so tenderly to manners strict and now long abandoned, in a house so sad and neglected, and all for nothing? Ah, what regrets she must have. Why, in the old tales, this is just the kind of place that provides the setting for all sorts of moving scenes. Such musings encouraged him to want to approach her, but fear that she might think him forward made him hesitate after all.
Good.
Yeah.
13 and finally learning something.
Taifu, whose wits were always about her, had no wish to give him his fill of the princess's music. The sky seems to be clouding over, my lady, she said. A guest of mine said he would be coming, and he might suspect me of having no use for him. Soon, though, when I have the time, do let me put the shutters down. And off Taifu went without encouraging her further. She stopped almost before she began.
Actually knows what she's doing.
Genji complained. I had no time even to decide whether or not she was worth listening to. What a bore. Her Highness's music had been well received. Let me stand nearer to listen, if you don't mind, he went on, and Taifu saw he was intrigued. I think I would rather not, though, she replied. The dismal...
She's like, no.
The dismal life she has to lead is so depressing for her, and her whole existence is really so sad. I do not see how I could take it upon myself. He agreed that she was probably right. One could get on perfectly easily without some lesser woman right from the start, but her very rank aroused his sympathy, and so he urged Taifu to convey something of my feelings to her nevertheless. He then prepared quietly to leave, having no doubt a rendezvous elsewhere.
So many women. Genji. Emotional affairs.
My lord, I often think how amusing it is that His Majesty worries so much about your being too serious. He will never see you in this disguise. Genji turned back toward her, smiling. You had better not bring up my feelings as though they were none of yours, he said. If mine is what you call wanton behavior, then I know a young woman who would be hard-pressed to defend herself. He often teased Taifu for being rather loose in her ways, and she was too abashed to say more. He stole off toward the main house, hoping for a sound from the lady within. When he reached a sheltered spot where only the tattered fragments of a screening fence remained, he discovered that another man had been standing there all the time. Who could he be?
Who are you? I'm the one who's supposed to be creeping on the lady's house. Who are you?
No doubt some gallant with his eye on the lady, he thought, melting into the shadows. But no, it was the secretary captain. Earlier...
Oh, that's one of his buds. That's one of his buds.
Does that matter?
No, considering Genji is secretly raising his daughter.
So weird.
So,
Earlier that evening, they had both left the palace together, and when, after they parted, Genji made for neither his excellencies nor Nijo, the captain so longed to know where he was going that he followed him despite having a rendezvous of his own.
she won't mind if I'm late. I have to follow Genji and find out what he's doing.
Genji had failed to recognize him on the nag he was riding, casually dressed in a hunting cloak. The captain was intrigued to see Genji enter an establishment quite new to him. He stood there listening to the music and then lay in wait on the assumption that Genji would soon be leaving. Genji, who still did not know who he was and who had no wish to be recognized, was slipping quietly away when the captain came straight up to him.
Finally noticed in the dark. Failed that stealth roll.
My lord, I was so put out when you just left me that I decided to keep you company.
And now we do poetry.
We were together when we turned our steps away from Palace Mountain, but I see, this 16th night, the moon hides where he will set. Genji was at once amused and annoyed when he grasped who the speaker was. What a thing to do to me, he complained bitterly. One certainly may gaze upon a radiance that illumines all, but who would wish to hunt out Mount Irusa where it sets? What would you do if someone else were to follow you this way when you are gadding about like this? You would be much safer with an attendant. You should not leave me behind. There could be an embarrassing incident when you are out at night in disguise. Genji,
Not wrong.
Genji hated to be found out this way, and he gave himself full credit for the secretary captain's failure so far to locate his little pig.
Yeah, his daughter. Weird.
Now in high good humor, the two did not set off again, each to his promised assignation.
Yeah.
Instead, they rode together in one carriage to his excellencies, under a moon pleasingly veiled by clouds, blowing away in concert on their flutes.
Well, I guess now I have to go to my father-in-law's house.
They stole in silently, since they had sent no men ahead to clear their path, and they changed to dress clothes in a deserted gallery. Then they launched into playing their flutes, looking the picture of innocence as though they had just arrived. His Excellency, who could never pass up a concert, brought out his own flute.
Now we're all gonna play. They're jamming. They're beyond jamming. They're jamming right now.
I just imagine this dude like rushing down the hallways with his flute, like,
I got it. Joining in.
so excited. And played it beautifully, for he was an expert musician. Then he called for instruments that he had various gentlewomen skilled at music play behind the blinds. Nakatsukasa was right here.
Yeah, Nakatsukasa.
Was very good on the biwa,
Yeah.
but she who had spurned the secretary captain had not refused Genji's kind attentions on his sporadic visits, and she had then inevitably seen her involvement with him become common knowledge.
Uh-oh.
Which had in turn earned her the displeasure of Genji's mother-in-law.
It would.
Now she was reclining against a pillar, obviously unhappy and ill at ease. She was miserable at the thought of going away where she would never see him again. The young gentleman remembered the music they had heard on the quay and dwelled with pleasure on how different that sad house had been, and the captain dreamed of the lady sweet and fair whom he would begin courting there after all her long years alone, and with whom he would then fall so recklessly in love that all the world would be talking about it, and he himself would teeter on the brink of folly. He recalled with mingled annoyance and apprehension the self-assured way Genji went roaming about. Would he let slip a chance like this?
Now we're both going to have an emotional affair with the same one.
Both were soon apparently writing to Her Highness.
Called it.
Neither got an answer, which baffled and irritated them. It was really too awful of her. Any lady living in a place like that should sometimes give poignant voice to her feelings by conveying the sorrows she knew so well in terms of the fleeting moods of plants, trees, or the sky.
You know what? I think ultimately Murasaki Shibuya was making fun of these guys.
I think so.
I really do. Like the whole hey, I'm gonna steal a girl and then a ghost is gonna kill her. Like it's so over the top.
Yeah.
And then it's stuff like this where it's like, Why isn't she writing back to me? I'm great and her life is sad.
Dang.
Dang.
The captain fretted even more than Genji that it was dull of her and rude as well to remain so shut up in herself.
I'm great and your life is tragic.
However ponderously serious she might be. Have you had any reply from her? He plaintively inquired of Genji, from whom he could keep nothing. I sent her a line to see what would happen and got back only a strange silence.
Why wouldn't she write back to me? I'm real pretty, not as pretty as Genji, but I'm pretty too.
Sure enough, Genji thought, he has been courting her, and he replied with a smile. Perhaps I have had no answer from her because I, for one, am not really that keen. The captain was very annoyed to be put off.
Genji's like, wow, you're like so into her. This is like Mean Girls.
Yes, when you started like earlier, I was like, it feels like Mean Girls.
Like, oh wow, you're like coming on really strong. Maybe like you should tone it down. Maybe like she'll actually reply to me because I'm not as overwhelming as you are.
Genji is
Gina George. Yeah.
and Gretchen Wiener.
Yeah, the Secretary General's captain. You know what? Regina George would steal Gretchen Wiener's daughter and raise her to be the perfect wife.
You heard it here, folks.
You heard it here first.
Anyways. Faced with such indifference, Genji had lost interest in an adventure that mattered little enough to him anyway, but he supposed that if the captain was now showering her highness with notes, she would yield to the one who sent her the most.
That is the opposite of the lesson you should learn.
The thought of how pleased with herself she would be after casting aside her first suitor was more than he could bear, and he therefore called Taifu into solemn conclave. It is extremely irritating of her to turn me away like this without even hearing me out, he said.
No means hell, Genji.
She must suspect me of wanting only to amuse myself, whereas in reality I am not frivolous at all. Things cannot help going wrong when the other person assumes the worst.
I'm not frivolous, says the guy who has at least 7 girlfriends. And is married. He has 1 wife, at least 7 girlfriends. He's had a new girlfriend in each chapter. Literally. 2 of them are dead. 1 of them by a ghost. Something I will never really get over.
1 is a child.
But yeah, just like, where do you find the time, Genji?
He's not frivolous.
Oh, and to be fair, he doesn't do anything else.
That's true.
He goes to, basically he goes to various houses. Be like, any pretty ladies? That's all he does. He shows up at the Emperor's Palace for a while, says hi to his dad. Then he like just basically travels from house to house looking for the ladies.
Things cannot help going wrong when the other person assumes the worst, and it always ends up being one's own fault. I should have thought someone well-disposed, someone living in peace without parents or brothers and sisters to bother her, would be far more attractive.
I want a woman with no family so they can't fight me. Serial killing language, again.
Oh no, my lord, I doubt she would suit you. I cannot imagine her being the sweet shelter from the rain that you have in mind. Few people are so desperately shy and withdrawn. She told him what she knew of the lady. Apparently, she is neither witty nor clever. After all, though, it is the childlike innocent ones who are the most apt to catch one's fancy.
Serial killer.
He had not forgotten. Spring and summer passed while he suffered from his recurrent fever and remained absorbed in his secret grief.
Oh my god.
That autumn, as quiet, persistent recollection led him to remember with longing even the sound of the fulling blocks and that other noise that had so offended his ears, he wrote often to the residence of the Hitachi prince, and when he still got no response, he waxed indignant with the lady for her boorish inexperience, vowed to reject defeat, and began pressing Taifu vigorously. What is going on? He fumed. I have never seen anything like it.
No means no. Again, did that lady who left her, who like basically ran away from you, mean nothing to you, Genji?
That was a fluke. She didn't mean to do that.
She did at least write back when he sent her that poem about how she like shedded her cicada shell.
That's right.
So I guess even then, like,
It feels
she
like-
wrote back. So
Yeah, this is the most rejection he's had.
in a while,
Yeah.
because there was that other lady who didn't ever write him back.
That's
It's just
true.
like, fine, I guess.
I guess. She sympathized. Not once have I suggested to her that you do not deserve her, as I see it.
Oh, that's Typhoon's way of saying I told him you were crap. I told her, I didn't suggest that you didn't deserve her.
I would never say that. That was
I
funny.
do really like Typhoon.
As I see it, her crippling shyness is the reason why she cannot bring herself to answer you. Definitely about something I said.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is just what I mean by inexperience. A girl may well be shy as long as she still knows little of life or is too young to do as she pleases, but I should think that this lady would give all things due consideration. I myself, for some reason, am feeling listless and low, and I would be quite satisfied to get an answer from her in the same vein.
I just imagine him doing that gift from Arrested Development when George Michael comes home and he just like lays down, like puts his backpack down and then just lays on the floor.
I am not out for hanky-panky.
Emotional affair only for me. Last time I took a girl somewhere, she got killed by a ghost.
All I want to do is sit for a while on her creaky veranda. I just cannot understand her, and that is why I want you to arrange it for me, if necessary, without her leave. I will not lose my head or do anything foolish.
Okay.
Taifu had mentioned her highness to him that night when they were almost alone, only because it had then still been his habit to gather with feigned indifference news of any lady at all, and she did not like having him press her now in such deadly earnest.
Wait, I thought you were just into all ladies. Like, I thought you were swiping right on everyone. Like, why are you so intense about this one girl now?
We're pausing the Tinder swiping.
We're pausing the Tinder swiping because we found one that we accidentally swiped right on, but then we looked again and we were like,
Yeah, that's the one.
that's her.
And she's left him on red, but
She left him on red. He said he keeps sending her DMs. And he's found her Twitter, he's found her Instagram, he keeps DMing her. It's not good. It's not looking good.
her highness lacked both experience and accomplishment, and in the end she might suffer, so Taifu feared, from Taifu's indiscretion. Still, it might be perverse just to turn a deaf ear to his pleas.
Again, the pretty privileged. But he is human. So what could go wrong? Many things. Anyway.
The old place had been so antiquated even in her father's time that nobody went there, and now visitors struggled even less often through the garden's weeds, so that when wonders of wonders, Genji's resplendent notes began to arrive, her pathetic gentlewoman broke into eager smiles and urged her, "Oh, my lady, do answer him,
I
do."
mean, to be fair, she has no family.
Yeah.
And a prince is interested in her.
Yeah.
Like, she could make hay off of this. Like, she won't marry him, but, like, if it would be one of those situations where it's like, this is someone Genji liked, she can marry pretty well off of that.
Yeah. Alas, their hopelessly timid mistress would not even read them. Well then, thought the careless, fun-loving Taifu, when the time comes and he talks to her through her blinds, if she doesn't like him, fine. That will be the end of it.
But you gotta mean it.
But if things go well and he begins calling, there is no one to stop him. She breathed not a word of this even to her father. After the 20th of the 8th month, on a night when the moon would rise so late that the wait for it seemed endless, when the only light was from the stars and the wind moaned in the pines, the lady, weeping, began to talk of the past. Taifu saw that the moment was at hand, and she must then have sent Genji a note, because he soon arrived, as always, in great secrecy.
It's very, like, big on the, like, I feel like if Genji was indeed be a rogue, it's like, you know what? No, I'm not going to the front door. I would be coming in through a window.
At last the moon rose, only to illumine gloomily for him the stretch of ragged fence at which he was gazing, when at Taifu's urging, her highness began softly to play her keen. No, she was not bad. The giddy Taifu anxiously wished her music might have something more excessively modern about it. Genji slipped inside without further ado, since there was no one to see him, and he had Taifu called. This is very awkward, she feigned surprise at the news.
Oh my god!
Of his arrival.
Not like I texted him that we were here. How could this have what a crazy coincidence.
What are you doing here? I gather he is here to speak to you, my lady. He's always displeased with you.
Surprise blind date.
You see, and because I keep reminding him that I can do nothing for him, he has been saying that he needs to come and explain himself to you in person. How am I to answer him? He is not as free as other people to do as he likes, and he surely deserves some consideration for that. Do listen to what he has to say, with something between you if you wish. Her Highness was stricken with embarrassment. But I do not know how to talk to people, she cried, slipping off in naive terror toward the farthest recesses of the house.
So Her Highness is basically like the ultimate introvert.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to see anyone. She doesn't even like Taifu. You're like, so most of the time, like women, when like they could talk face to face.
Yeah.
And she still has a screen between her and Taifu.
Oh, that's right.
So she's like, I don't want anyone seeing me.
Yeah, man. But I mean, maybe she's having like that.
I mean, yeah, like legit. If that makes you like, I know the secretary captain and Genji both think she has the saddest life imaginable.
Yeah.
Maybe she likes it that way.
Right? Taifu smiled. It pains me to see you behaving so much like a child, my lady. It is quite acceptable for the most exalted lady to retain a girlish innocence as long as she has her parents to look after her, but it simply is not right for you in your present unfortunate situation to remain shut up forever in yourself. Very well, said Her Highness, who could never bring herself to say no to anything. If you mean me only to listen and not answer, we must have the lattice shutters and so on properly locked.
Hey, yeah, I was just, you know what, I'll listen. But I'm not saying anything.
But it would be rude to leave him on the veranda, Taifu tactfully reminded her. As for anything forward or tasteless, why, he would never.
He wouldn't, though. He is still a teenage boy. He literally snuck into a woman's bedroom, into her bed, beyond all of her ladies in waiting, picked her up, and took her.
Legit.
So Taifu maybe has not seen. I bet Taifu doesn't know about the
Probably.
That whole thing.
Yeah.
But still, when it's the epitome of that like girlfriend of a guy who's like, he would never do anything bad, and it's like, you've never dated him.
Right.
Yeah.
With her own hands, she fastened the sliding panel between the chamber and the little aisle room, securely shut, and arranged a cushion in the aisle for Genji to sit on.
If it makes you feel better, I'll lock the door.
Having not the slightest idea how to talk to anyone like Genji, Her Highness resigned herself, despite grave misgivings, to faith that Taifu knew best. An old woman, probably her nurse, had by then gone off sleepily to her room to lie down. There remained 2 or 3 younger gentlewomen who, in their eagerness for a glimpse of Genji's widely celebrated looks, were nervously preparing themselves for the great moment.
To be fair, this is a little bit like Harry Styles deciding to come visit you. And you're like, I'm going to talk to Harry Styles. But like your 3 like friends are like, but then I get to see Harry Styles.
Yeah.
Like, and we know he's hot. And we've heard he's hot. Legendarily hot.
We want to see
that.
Once changed into decent clothes and suitably tidied up, the lady herself went to meet her visitor with no flicker of any such anticipation. The visitor lent such enthralling grace to the discretion with which he had clothed his own peerless beauty that Taifu longed to show him off to someone able to appreciate him. Poor man, she thought, there's nothing here for him. At least, though, she could feel relieved that Her Highness was behaving with dignity and would probably do nothing eccentric in his presence. She's like, don't be weird. Don't be
weird. Okay. Look, my friend Harry Styles is coming to visit. You should not be weird.
She worried that what she had done to evade Genji's constant reproaches might now bring sorrow to the one whose plight so affected her.
Yeah.
Genji assumed from Her Highness's rank that she would flaunt no modish charms.
Yeah.
but instead exhibit a supremely distinguished manner. And once she had moved a little closer, at Taifu's insistence, the delicious scent that then reached him and her quiet composure convinced him that he was right. With great eloquence, he confided to her the yearning she had inspired in him for so long, only to meet more resoundingly than ever with dead silence.
I gotta say, the concept of, like, I would be very uncomfortable in that situation, right?
Yeah.
Like, some man is coming to tell me how much he loves me and, like, has loved me for ages and, like, wants to, like, write to me and stuff
Right.
like that. I would love to hear that behind the screen. So I didn't have to do the, like, neutral face.
Right, yeah. She can make whatever faces she wants.
Right.
Like, you're a stranger. Stranger, thank you. Did I say it was met with dead silence?
Dead silence.
I give up, he groaned to himself, and he said out loud, "Ah, how many times have I found myself undone by such silences, and sustained by just one thought? You never say, 'Do not speak.' Tell me to go away if you must. This uncertainty is very painful." A lively young person named Jeju, a daughter of Her Highness's nurse, was in such an agony of embarrassment by now that she moved beside her mistress and answered.
Okay, it's like, okay, you can't figure out poetry. I'm gonna do this for you. Also, to be fair, it would be very embarrassing to be the friend sitting to the side while a man professes his love for your friend and she's just like dumbfounded.
I think I would start laughing from like the awkwardness.
Right.
Yeah.
This would be my response, is be like, I'm gonna just answer for you because I can't handle this.
And you totally would. I can see that.
Like, you know, just you stay here. Hey. I've actually done this. I will tell you a quick story. I had a friend who, we were at like Cider Fest, and this guy came up to her to tell her how, like, you know, she was really pretty and like really beautiful, and like would she like to go out with him? And I'm like, she's engaged. It wasn't a lie, but
Love it.
But I was just like immediately like didn't even give her a chance to respond. I was just like, she's engaged. So anyways, me.
Jiju, aka Anne.
aka me.
Why would I never ring the
Why I would never.
Why I would never ring the bell, as though to say, the debate is closed, but at a loss to reply, there I find myself surprised. So young a voice, and one so lacking in gravity, for Jiju had spoken not as an intermediary, but as her mistress in person, seemed rather familiar in tone, considering who Her Highness was. Now it is I who am silenced, the astonished Genji replied.
You just gotta get out of this.
That you do not speak means far more than any words that I know full well. Yet your taciturnity has been a hard trial to bear. He kept up a stream of pleasantries, bantering or serious, but nothing worked. In frustration before this evidence that she must be odd in some way or her feelings engaged elsewhere, he gently slid the panel open and entered.
Every time, Genji.
I thought it was locked.
I thought it was locked.
How awful of him. And he promised he wouldn't. Taifu felt such pain for Her Highness that she averted her eyes and went off to her room.
No, Taifu, don't leave her.
Damn.
Every time. They all leave. They're always like, I am shamed. And they leave.
The young gentlewoman forgave his behavior. So famous were his supreme good looks.
They got to see him.
And they could not bring themselves to raise any serious outcry.
Every time.
Even though it certainly was all very sudden, and their mistress was pitifully unprepared. Her Highness herself was numb with shame and wounded modesty, for which Genji did not blame her, since the moment was one in which her state easily touched his tenderest feelings, and since she still led so sheltered and so virtuous a life. Yet he also found her comportment peculiar and somehow pathetic. What about her would possibly have attracted him?
Oh, see, you didn't know her.
Don't mean me. Groaning, he took his leave late in the night. Taifu was lying awake, listening for clues to how things were going, but she did not rouse anyone to see him off because she did not wish to betray her involvement. He stole away very quietly indeed. He returned to Nijo and lay down to brood on and on over life's endless frustrations and to lament that any one of this princess's not inconsiderable standing should have so little to offer. These miseries were still whirling through his head when the secretary captain arrived. "You are certainly sleeping late," he said. "I am sure there must be a reason." Genji arose. "I was overindulging in the luxury of sleeping alone. You have come from the palace?" "Yes, I was there just now," his friend answered breathlessly. "Today is the day when the musicians and dancers are to be chosen for His Majesty's progress to the Suzaku Palace. I heard about it last night, and I am on my way now to inform His Excellency. I shall have to go straight back." "Well then, I shall go with you." Genji had them both served a morning meal, after which they got into the same carriage, though the other one followed it. "You still look rather sleepy," the captain observed reprovingly, and he added with some rancor, "You have a good deal to hide." This was a day when many things were to be decided, and Genji spent the rest of it in attendance at court. Remembering with a pang of guilt that he owed her at least a letter, he finally sent one that evening. What with the weather having turned wet and his not really being free to leave, he may well have wanted nothing to do with any sweet shelter from the rain. And Her Highness's, Taifu felt very sorry indeed once the time to expect a letter had passed. She herself remained deeply ashamed, and it never occurred to her to blame Genji, even when his morning letter turned up in the evening.
I mean, you should blame him. This is his fault.
He had written, "I have never seen any sign the evening mist proposes to clear, but to make things even worse, tonight it must rain and rain." How anxiously time passes while I await a break in the clouds, the gentlewomen urged their mistress to answer them anyway, despite their bitter disappointment at this evidence that he would not be coming.
So if he came for another 2 nights, it would essentially be like, come here. Oh. Like, would it be like, this isn't just an affair. This is like a serious thing. But, like, it's 3 nights in a row. Yeah.
It was at last Jiju who invoked the lateness of the hour to give her the words as before. "Kindly give a thought to one who awakes the moon in the darkened night, though your own melancholy have another cause than hers." With the encouragement of all present, Her Highness wrote this poem out on Murasaki paper, so old that it had reverted to ash gray, in startlingly definite letters, antique in style and evenly balanced top and bottom. It did not deserve a glance, and Genji put it down.
Day.
He did not like to speculate about what she thought of him. Her Highness, meanwhile, lamented her misfortune, never knowing that although he did indeed by now regret having won her, he understood his duty and had every intention of upholding it to the end. His Excellency insisted on bringing Genji home with him when he withdrew from the palace late that night. His sons, who were looking forward to...
Gotta see your wife.
His sons, who were looking forward to this imperial excursion, gathered to talk it over and busied themselves every day rehearsing each his own dance. The clamor of instruments was never so loud, for each was keen to excel, nor were theirs the usual ones, for the voice of the greater Hichiriki and the Sakuhachi now rent the air, and they even rolled a great drum up to the railing and beat it themselves. Genji was so absorbed that he managed to steal time only for those ladies who meant the most to him.
And he is not his wife.
And he allowed all communication with the Hitachi prince's residence to lapse. Autumn drew to a close while Her Highness's hopes dwindled away. Taifu came to see Genji when the imperial excursion was near and the air rang with music under rehearsal. "How is she?" he asked guiltily. Taifu told him, "Your complete indifference to her is extremely painful for those who are with her daily." She was almost in tears. He understood now how he had betrayed Taifu's trust, that he would never treat Her Highness with less than the highest consideration, and he shuddered to imagine Taifu's opinion of him. For Her Highness herself he felt only commiseration when he imagined how silent and withdrawn she must be. "I haven't a moment these days," he said, sighing. "I really cannot help it," he added with a smile. "She knows so little of the sorrows of love, you see. I want only to make her wiser."
What?
His smiles and his youthful charm made Taifu smile too. It is hopeless, she thought. He is of just the age to make women suffer, and no wonder he is often thoughtless and does as he pleases. At any rate, he occasionally renewed his visits once this busy time was over.
Thanks, Genji.
I'm just helping her.
I'm just helping her see
She just-
what the real world is like.
She just needs a little bit of heartbreak, you
Don't
know?
worry about it. Anyways, he became so caught up in pampering his Murasaki's little kinswoman, now that he had taken her for his own,
The child.
that he called even less often at Rokujo. And as for that ruinous mansion, he could not, despite his sympathy, find the will to go there, or, as the days went by, feel any great wish to see more deeply into the extraordinary reticence of its inhabitant. But then his mood changed, and he came to suppose that she might still have virtues to recommend her, that touching her in the dark might have left certain of her mysteries unrevealed, and that he did want to see her properly. However, it would have been rude to throw direct light on her, and one evening, when he was not expected, he therefore stole in and peered through the gap between two lattice shutters. Alas, he had no view of her at all. The standing curtains, though dismally worn, had remained in place for all these years, and had never been moved aside, and to his regret he therefore saw before him only 4 or 5 gentlewomen. They had withdrawn from their mistress's presence, and were now eating a heart-rendingly insipid meal from stands laden with Chinese bowls of more or less the reserved Celadon color, but in pathetic condition.
He's so judgmental, like,
Oh, like, it's just being real mean. Farther off in the corner room, shivering women sat in unspeakably grubby white, wearing filthy aprons at their waist and looking impossibly ancient. Still, he was amused.
impossibly ancient.
He looked so old.
Hey.
Still, he was amused to note that with those combs in their hair over their foreheads, they were nearly falling out. They had their like elsewhere, after all, in the women's music pavilion or the hall of the sacred mirror. To him, they bore no resemblance to women charged with waiting on a lady. "Oh dear, it is so cold this year," one cried with tears in her eyes. "This is what you get for living so long." Why did I ever think life was hard when His late Highness was alive? This one was shivering so hard that she nearly leaped from the floor. Look at the miserable way we live now. Their pitiful complaints were too painful. Genji drew back and knocked at the shutter as though he had just arrived. With "good gracious" and similar cries, they trimmed the lamp, swung open the shutter, and admitted him to the room. Jiju had not been there lately, for she was among the young women who served the Kamo priestess. This time they all seemed so much stranger, so much more uncouth, that he felt as though he hardly knew the place. The snow that had provoked their sharp complaints was falling more thickly than ever. The sky looked grim, a hard wind was blowing, and no one moved to relight the lamp when it went out. He recalled his moment of danger from a spirit. Let's just think about that again real quick. That time you got a girl killed. And he found relief from the equal desolation here in reflecting that the place was at least smaller and somewhat better populated. But he knew that during this eerie night he would get little sleep. The scene had its charm, its pathos, and a strange appeal, but he felt cheated when she remained so inaccessible and so unresponsive that he had no pleasure from her at all. Dawn seemed to have come at last. He raised the shutters himself and looked out over the snow-covered garden. No footprint broke the vast, empty, and chillingly lonely expanse. "Look at how beautiful the sky is now," he said, feeling that a prompt departure would be too cruel, and he added with some rancor, "The distance you keep between us is very painful." It was not yet quite light, and he looked so wondrously young and handsome by the glimmer of the snow that the sight brought grins to the aged women's faces. "Do go out to him, my lady," they encouraged her. "You must. It makes such a difference to be nice." She tidied herself up more or less, since despite her timidity, she could never say no when told what to do, and slipped out towards him. He pretended not to look at her and gazed into the garden, but he gave her many a sidelong glance. What was she like? How glad he would be, foolish hope, if their present intimacy had brought out anything at all attractive. First, her seated height was unusual. She was obviously very long in the back. I knew it, he thought in despair. Next came the real disaster, her nose. He noted it instantly. She resembled the mount of the Bodhisattva Fugen, who So the mount and the Bodhisattva period is an elephant. So she has a big nose. Long and lofty that nose was, slightly drooping towards the end, and with at the tip a blush of red, a real horror. In color, she was whiter than snow, in fact, slightly bluish, and her forehead was strikingly broad, although below it her face seemed to go on and on for an extraordinarily long way. She was thin to the point of being pitifully bony, and even through her gown, he could see the excruciating angularity of her shoulders. Why had he insisted on finding out what all of her looked like?
I liked it better in my head.
Yeah. At the same time, though, she made a sight so outlandish that he could not keep his eyes off her. The shape of her head and the sweep of her hair all but equaled those he admired in the greatest ladies he knew, and he noted how her hair trailed a foot or so beyond the hem of her dress gown. It may be cruel to go through her costume, but the old romances always start out by describing a character's clothes. Over a deplorably faded layering of sanctioned rose, she wore a dress gown dark with grime, and over that a richly glossy, scented coat of sable pelts. No doubt distinguished attire in ages past, but a shockingly eccentric get-up for a lady who, after all, was still young. She was basically wearing the equivalent of, like, old maid, but... Her face showed how cold she would be without the furs, though, and he felt sorry for her. He, too, felt bereft of speech when he got nothing in reply, but he tried conversing with her to test her silence. Even the way she put her hand to her mouth in acute embarrassment was so rustic and antiquated that it reminded him of the way officials in procession on ceremonial occasions held their arms, and her accompanying smile was thoroughly disconcerting. At once pained and sympathetic, he hastily made ready to depart. He's like, okay. So, wow, look at my wrist, time to go.
Wow.
I would be much better pleased if you who have no one to care for you were to welcome the man you have now, he said by way of excuse. Your refusal to yield is too disappointing. When the morning sun has melted the icicles all along the eaves, why are the waters within even now frozen so hard? But she gave him only a and a smile, and her abject failure to find a reply was so pathetic that he left. He can't engage in witty repartee via poetry. You're not hot in hand. It had been obvious even by night, when darkness hid 1,000 other flaws, that the middle gate where his carriage waited was perilously warped and tottery. And now, in this mournful solitude where nothing looked warm but the pines and their thick coats of snow, the house felt remarkably like a mountain village. No doubt this was what those fellows had meant by an overgrown old house. Ah, he thought, how I would love to have someone very dear come here to live, and then miss her and worry about her. She might take my mind off this forbidden longing.
What?
Is the forbidden longing for the daughter? What a shame that the one who does live here must spoil a perfect place by having nothing to offer. Who else would ever put up with her? If she and I are now a couple, it must be because her late and doting father remained with her in spirit and led me to her. Genji had a man of his brush off a heavily burdened orange tree, at which a pine broke free too, as though in defiance, and with a swish shed tumbling billows of snow. How he longed for someone, even if not wholly enthralling, with whom he could at least enjoy the normal give and take. You have like 7 girlfriends.
Dude.
Go somewhere else.
He basically right now, he's like, nobody loves me.
Ugh.
I wish I had someone.
This girl is not as hot as I thought she would be, and she can't engage in banter with me, and her calligraphy's bad, and her house is dirty. Her clothes are old, and all of her, like, gentle women are old. Oh, no one loves me. Genji, you have at least 7 girlfriends, besides this one. The gate his carriage had to pass through was not yet open, and he sent for the caretaker with the key. Out came a strikingly ancient man, accompanied by a woman who might have been his daughter or his granddaughter, one could not tell which, and whose soiled clothes stood out against the snow. Visibly half frozen, she was clutching, wrapped in her sleeves, a horrid sort of box containing a few live coals. When the old man failed to get the gate open, she went to give him ineffectual help. Genji's men opened it in the end. Just everything is so sad about this house. Like, he who sees these snows so cruelly heaped upon so ancient a head, moistened with no fewer tears this morning his own cold sleeves, and the younger one's body is bare, he hummed, smiling at the memory of that cold, cold figure with her blushing nose suddenly came to mind. Oh, so still thinking about her. What smile would the secretary captain find for that nose if he showed it to him? He hated to imagine his friend, who was always after him, actually coming across him here. He might have dropped Her Highness then and there if she had been quite ordinary and had had nothing remarkable about her one way or the other. But now that he had actually seen her, his sympathy for her was keener than ever, and he sent her constant messages, together with thoroughly practical gifts. Not sable furs, but silks and silk twills, cotton wadding, or clothes for the old gentlewomen, and even, since his thoughtfulness embraced all, high or low, for the old gatekeeper. He was relieved when all this practicality seemed not to offend her, and he decided to look after her in this manner from now on. His most unusual presents included things that no one would normally have dared to give her. So at least he's like, okay, I'm not feeling like a romantic connection here, but like, I can upgrade your stuff. I'm a sugar daddy.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, like, that's the best thing that could have happened.
True.
She of the cicada shell, as he had seen her at her ease in profile that evening, had no looks at all, but her deportment had more than made up for it, and she had not displeased him. Could a prince's daughter be worth less? It was true, these things had nothing to do with Frank. Such had been her maddening strength of character that he was the one who had lost in the end. Memories like these ran through his head whenever a chance recalled them. The year came to a close. Genji was in his room at the palace when Typhoon's ship turned up. He liked having her dress his hair because she never flirted with him, but he often teased her or asked her for personal favors, and she came without being called whenever she had something to tell him. I have something odd to tell you about, but I have something odd to tell you about, but I'm afraid I do not quite know how, she said, lapsing with a grin into silence. What kind of thing do you mean? Surely you have nothing to hide from me. Oh no, my lord. As far as any trouble of my own might be concerned, you would of course in your kindness be the very first. But this matter is so difficult to bring up, you see. Words failed her. You're leading me on again, aren't you? He said testily. You have a letter from Her Highness, she announced, and produced it. Then what was the mystery about? Taifu's heart sank merely to have him take it. It was on thick Michio no Kune paper, heavily perfumed. So that is an odd choice for a love letter, apparently. Oh. It's a white paper made especially in northern Japan for tree bark. Heavily perfumed. Her Highness's writing had certainly improved. Her poem read, Robe from far Cathay, your heart turns so coolly, O love, against me. Look upon my sleeves and see how wet they are now with tears. While he pored uncomprehendingly over these words, Taifu placed before him a heavy, old-fashioned clothing box and undid its cloth wrapping. My lord, it is impossible to view the contents of this box without a shudder, but Her Highness insisted that you must have it to wear on New Year's Day, and I could not very well make her take it back. Perhaps I should simply have put it away, but that would have meant ignoring her express wish, and so after you've had a look, you would have been quite wrong to put it away. Such thoughtfulness brings great joy to one upon whose moistened sleeves no love pillows her dear head. He said no more. Good heavens, he groaned to himself, what an awful poem. This must be the best she can do on her own. I suppose Jishu is the scholar who usually retouches her poems and guides her brush. He contemplated it with a smile, reflecting that this might well be the time to speak of awestruck gratitude, considering the effort it must have cost her. The watching Taifu reddened. In the box, there offered itself most tediously to the gaze a plum-red dress book, insufferably old and drab, and of the same color inside and out. Apparently the underlayer and the outside of a dress book are supposed to be different colors, so this is just more proof that she's unfashionable. Yeah, and for the record, that like Road from Far Cathay is a decorative pillow word unrelated in meaning to the rest of the poem.
Oh.
It should have a conventional association with the syllable that follows it, but her effort to bring this off does not work, and the rest of the poem is extremely trite. That is the analysis of the poem. Anyways.
Even the footnotes person is being critical.
I mean, she's yeah, look. Anyways, impossible, he thought, then spread out the letter and casually wrote along one edge these words, which Taifu read from beside him. This is not at all a color to which I warm. What then did I mean by letting myself brush sleeves with the safflower in full brush?
Right.
Weird. Weird. He's being real weird. He's basically telling her this gift is for trash. Yet I had so admired the flower's depth of hue. Taifu pitied the lady when she understood that various moonlit glimpses of her must have given Genji good reason to complain about the safflower, but she enjoyed his poem anyway.
Taifu. For
The robe may be pale, dipped as it has been just once in the scarlet dye, but oh, do take care at least never to damage her name, she murmured with seasoned wit, and she added, all this is such a worry. Her verse was no masterpiece, but if only, he thought bitterly, her highness could manage that much. It hurt to receive such nonsense from anyone so well-born, and he trembled lest it disgrace her. Yeah, so as a woman growing up in this, and she's basically a prince's daughter,
Yeah.
she should have been better educated to be able to do this.
Yeah.
Essentially. And she's not, which means either her education was neglected or she didn't care to actually learn. So that's why he's I live expecting you to be better than this.
Or in my mind, she's doing it all on purpose.
We love it.
That's my secret imagining.
Several gentlewomen arrived. We'd better hide this. We ever heard of such a thing? Why did I ever show it to him? Taifu lamented. He probably takes me too now for a perfect bore. She stole away, mortified. The next day, he peered into the gentlewomen's sitting room while Taifu was in waiting on his majesty. Here, he called. Here is my answer from yesterday. What a time it gave me. He tossed it to her. The others longed to know what it was. Farewell to the maiden of Mount Mikasa, so like the blushing red of the plum, he sang as he left. So this snatch of song, apparently taken from two different songs, may possibly read in the following way. Tadaume no Hana, the blushing red of the plum, is a copyist's error for Tadare no Hana, which could mean not only the red Tadare flower, but the red nose of the sacred maiden text of the forge. So when she had a little red nose. This red nose elephantine, red nose. This red nose could then suggest the maiden's hoto, heart, but also sex. A maiden of Mount Mikasa would serve the Kasuga shrine, and since this shrine's main deity came originally from Itachi province, this expression too may allude to the daughter of the Itachi prince. In fact, since the Kasuga deity may have been associated in the 11th century as later with the work of the forge, both expressions may allude to the red nose, i.e. sex of maiden in the forge, Suetsu. So he's basically making fun of her nose as he tosses it. Anyways, this struck Taifu as very funny, and those not in on the joke demanded to know what she was laughing to herself about. Oh, nothing, she answered. One frosty morning he probably happened to see someone in scarlet silk with a matching nose. I didn't much like that snatch of song. You'll have to do better than that, they answered, uncomprehending. None of us has a red nose. He must have caught sight of Sakan no Taifu or Higono with Uneme. The gentlewomen at her highness's all gathered round to admire Genji's reply when Taifu delivered it.
They're just gonna go backward.
To the lonely nights when a robe comes between us, would you then, you say, have me add more layers yet to keep us further apart? It was on white paper, and all the more delightful for having been written so casually. On the evening of the last day of the year, Taifu delivered that same clothing box to her highness, now filled with a set of gowns originally given to Genji, a grape-colored gown and a layering imperial rose or something like that. He obviously disapproved of the color her highness had sent him, but the old women declared nonetheless, well, the scarlet one was a lot more dignified. It was just as good as these. Furthermore, our mistress's poem was nicely done and made perfect sense, while his is just as clever. As for their mistress, that poem had taken her so much trouble that she wrote it down for safekeeping. I think she's just not good at poetry, guys.
Yeah.
She might be like a STEM girl in an artsy world.
Yeah.
The gentlemen were to go mumming this year, after the first days of the new year, and as always, the air everywhere rang with the songs they were rehearsing. But despite the commotion, Genji's sympathy went to the lonely princess. After the festival on the 7th, he withdrew from His Majesty's presence, made as though to settle into his room at the palace, and then appeared late that night at her residence. The place had more life to it now, and she herself seemed a little less stiff. He kept wondering whether she could possibly have turned over a new leaf. He purposefully lingered until the sun rose in the sky. When he opened the double doors to the east, its rays streamed in unimpeded, since the roof of the gallery opposite had fallen in. And the light glancing off a powdering of snow allowed him to see easily into the room. She had come forward a little and was now lying watching him put on his dress cloak. The tilt of her head and the way her hair spilled away from her were lovely. He lifted a lattice shoulder, thinking how glad he would be if the turn of the year had brought her out a bit, but he did not put it up all the way, for he had learned his lesson. Instead, he brought over an armrest to prop it on, and then set about smoothing his disordered side locks.
He's just doing his hair.
A woman brought him the Chinese comb box and hairdressing chest that went with an impossibly ancient mirror stand. Yes, she even had a few man's accessories, so ornate as to be comical. Today she was dressed more like other ladies, having dressed precisely according to the contents of that box. That he did not register, though. He noted only the oddness of her jauntily patterned dress gown. Do let me hear your voice sometimes, at least this year. Never mind the long-awaited warbler. What I really look forward to is a change in you. Spring carolings, she at last replied tremulously. There, you see, he laughed. I am sure it is the new year that has done it. He then took his leave, humming I Must Be Dreaming, while she leaned against a pillar, watching him go. She had her hand over her mouth, but he still glimpsed the rich blue of that blushing flower. And his mind was invaded by the thought, it makes her look such a fright. His young Murasaki looked deliciously pretty to him when he returned to Nijo, and he was delighted to enjoy the color scarlet so much after all. The plain, pleasantly rumpled cherry blossom lawn dress she had on, coupled with the artlessness of her ways, made her simply enchanting. In deference to her grandmother's old-fashioned manners, her teeth had not yet received any blacking. That was like you mix like a substance together and you black the teeth when they get married.
Mm.
That's the origin of like if a woman is killed on her wedding day and she turns into a spirit. Like there's a book Cassandra called Nothing But Blackened Teeth. That's from that link. Have I done before? Yeah. But he had her made up, and the sharp line of her eyebrows was very attractive. He wondered with all his heart why he spent so much time on his foolish adventures instead of staying at home with his dear companion. Good question. Meanwhile, the two of them began as usual to play with dolls. She drew pictures and colored them, scattering them about happily in her excitement. Genji made a picture of his own. He drew a lady with very long hair, and at the tip of her nose he put a dab of rouge. Yes, she was still ugly, even in a painting.
Dang.
Like out.
Noting in a nearby mirror how handsome he was, he gave himself a bright red nose, and looked again. No beauty of his could survive having that in the middle of his face. His young lady laughed merrily at the sight. How would you feel if I were disfigured this way? I would hate it.
Oh my god.
She began to worry that the red might stick. He pretended to wipe it off and gravely announced, It won't come off. What a horrible trick I have played on myself. What will His Majesty say? She came and wiped it off tenderly for him. Now, he teased her, don't go daubing me up like hay shoe. With red, I can still manage. They made a delightful couple.
It's just weird.
The sun was bright and warm, and the plums among all the budding trees swathed in spring haze were most visibly promising to burst into bloom. The red plum tree by the steps down to the garden flowered especially early, and it was already tinged with color. Why, I do not know, but I cannot say I like any scarlet flower, though I have great affection for the tall sprays of the plum. Ah, me, the perplexed Genji sighed. I wonder what happened to all those ladies in the end. And that's the end of that chapter, where we learned Genji's innermost thoughts. He finally found a woman that he thought was like had no attractive qualities.
Wow.
And yeah.
And he dove deep into
And
that.
he still was like, I'm still gonna buy you stuff though, because you need it.
I mean, I guess that's one good thing.
One good thing. But yeah, so we continue with the tale of Genji.
Oh, God.
Next week, if you missed part of today's stream or you want to catch up on our previous streams, check out our YouTube page. And we'll see you next time for more Genji making questionable decisions. I can only imagine. All right. Bye.
Bye.